All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining this Globinar. We have gotten the great opportunity from Global Chamber to host this regarding DEI in the recruitment world. And so this webinar is really going to be a great opportunity to speak towards DEI in the workplace, but also from a unique perspective of what recruiters and account managers see on a day-to-day basis. So, first and foremost, thank you to Doug and Cesar for helping us set this up and have the opportunity to speak to anyone. I will say that if anybody has any questions, any comments to anything that's made, we welcome that. Go ahead and write in the chat box. I don't know if all the speakers are going to get the opportunity to answer them, but we can always address them after the webinar is done. And then, you can sort of be able to personally be addressed and we can talk this out even further. But just for introduction purposes and sort of why this webinar came about and why this idea came about, I am Erica Hartz. I'm the Global Partnership Director with reesmarx. I had a wonderful opportunity to be connected to Maria Putnam with DEI Leadership Institute. She is part of the Global Chamber. Doug and Cesar introed me directly and gave me the opportunity to take part in DEI Leadership Institute. And I actually received a certification for DEI Master Practitioner. And during that time of that training, I learned quite a bit. And I think that sometimes when we talk about DEI, we think to ourselves, oh, I already know. I respect everybody. I care for people. I do the best I can every single day. But that program and that certification process really had a lot of self-reflecting that it involved for me, and things that I learned about myself, that some things I wasn't exactly happy with, and some things that I wanted to continue into reesmarx and really just push it on forward. So I have to give a shout out to obviously Maria Putnam and the DEI Leadership Institute. And if anybody hasn't gotten certified, I urge you to at least have one person or multiple people from your company to take that course, learn about themselves, learn about how they can enhance their company. I have 3 speakers on today that I apologize if you hear any noises in the background but I am going to share my screen really quickly just to introduce the team members that I have on today. Just give me 1 second. Okay. Can everybody see that? Or at least the speakers, can you see that? Perfect. Okay, so the Globinar is on diversity, equity, inclusion in recruitment, leading and innovating. So just that we could probably handle this first and foremost, what does DEI stand for? DEI stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity is the presence of difference within any given setting. Especially a company's organization. It's pretty important to the success of that company. We have equity, which is a process of ensuring that the processes and programs are fair to and equal to anybody that joins an organization. And then inclusion is giving that employee or giving that member the right and the opportunity to voice their own opinions, enabling them to really feel like they're part of the company, which I think is probably the biggest thing that most people don't really know is, are we doing that inclusion part? Are we setting up equity to set these individuals up to make them feel like they are part of the company? They are as if they were like an owner of the company. So this is just about reesmarx. So ultimately what we do is we help with global expansion. We help companies grow into new regions of the world daily regarding the talent pools. We have strong advisory, benchmarking of understanding what you're going to get yourself into, as well as specifically placing those candidates and those new employees to be part of your team and expand your company on a global level. So today the speakers are myself, who I've already introduced. We have Michael Hancock, Frankie Loon, and Nicole Parker. I already introduced myself. We have Mike. Mike is one of our really strong recruiters. I could read this whole bio, but it's available on the Global Chamber website as well as reesmarx. But he's been with the company for a good amount of time. He has a strong understanding of our process. He is a wonderful recruiter. And also he has a unique perspective regarding DEI because he is a member of the LGBTQ community. He resides in Atlanta, Georgia. So he's a US citizen. So he gets to see that side of the US environments with DEI. And so he's going to be a great person. I'll ask some questions of him, and hopefully, we'll have quite a bit of conversations between across the pond, difference in DEI, difference of expectations, and what we see in different countries. We have Frankie. He has been with the company for quite some time as well. He is not only a recruiter, but he's a client relationship manager and a recent new business development team member. He has a strong understanding of the type of clients that we've worked with, the type of candidates that we've worked with. So he really has a full desk experience, and so he can speak towards that. He is also part of the LGBTQ community. He spent his childhood in Hong Kong, and he now resides in the UK. So he really has cross-border understanding of difference of environments, different cultures, ethnicities, races, etc. And so he's going to be a really great voice from the reesmarx team as well. And then we have Nicole, and Nicole is a very new team member to reesmarx, and she's not really coming in from the recruitment side. She handles operations, so she really dips her toe in involvement with our recruitment team, with our account management team, with our marketing team, which is very essential regarding DEI, because your marketing is really how you're presenting yourself outwardly to other companies, but it's also how you represent yourself internally. And so she's somebody that can come in with a new point of view of really being able to analyze reesmarx ourselves and say, how can we do better? So that is everybody. And I will stop sharing my screen. 1 second. Sorry. Hey, Cesar, is there any way you could kick me off the screen share? It seems like oh, never mind, I can do it. Okay, so now it sparks the conversation. And like I said, I really hope that this conversation, it isn't so much of everybody has the same opinion about everything. We have 4 different individuals on the call that have completely different takes, completely different backstories. They fall into different marginalized groups in different regions. And so what's great about DEI is that we spark that conversation of difference of opinions. We don't want to have the same opinion. If we did, we would sort of fall into what companies were doing 20, 30, 50 years ago of just expecting that everybody was the same. They didn't take that step towards equity and inclusion or understanding the diversity present. So what I'm going to start with is I'm going to have a question directed, and I don't know if the conversation is really going to take us somewhere, but we're going to use this hour to really just dive into the recruitment side as well as personal takeaways. So the first question I have is for Frankie. Frankie, so have you ever run into a client specifically requesting you to source out a role that conflicts with DEI? And how would you handle a client like that?
Well, thanks for the intro, Erica, and thank you, Global Chambers, for the opportunity to talk here. Now, yes, going back to your question, yes, there are plenty of instances in the past where our clients have asked us to go down a certain route for a certain profile of a candidate. They definitely have something that they clearly have in mind, but they may not have quite verbally expressed what they exactly wanted. Okay, so often it's the case we'll only find out down the route after presenting a few candidates, and then getting some feedback, and after a few rejections, then the true sort of target profile that they have in mind really comes to light, right? So I'll take most of these instances would be usually classified down to geographical location. So I specialize in the Asia Pacific region for reesmarx, helping our clients to expand in that area of the world. So for that part of the world, you'd still get some of those traditional sort of business cultures and social values where business would tend to gel better and run better if there are certain representatives of a company there trying to expand in that region. So and one of those countries that despite its developed sort of status and economic status, but it's still relatively traditional in the world, is Japan, right? And we've had a Californian client there, a software company who wanted to expand the team locally in Tokyo. So the California team was relatively open to whichever profile that we can find in Japan, but ultimately the decision making power fell to a hiring manager based in Japan. So that hiring manager is Japanese, and for this hiring manager, he had a very definite profile in mind. It had to be of certain age, a certain gender, nationality, ethnicity, etc., in order to represent the company in the Japanese business scene. We only found that out after sending a few profiles. So after during feedback calls, the hiring manager became quite explicit in his requirements, saying, "Oh, it needs to be someone who's of a native Japanese." So and that's quite strange because it's not we're trying to enforce DEI, from a recruitment agency perspective, but it's actually the head office for that hiring manager in Japan, over the headquarters in California, already is quite open in terms of the candidate profile, but internally, sometimes with our clients' organizations, they might have cultural, disagreements as to what type of profile should join, what type of candidates should join the company. So, and that's one instance where I think we try to sort of influence the Japanese hiring manager to say, here are some candidates who are not exactly what you're looking for. They might not be Japanese, but they've been in Japan for many decades now, and they have the experience and to prove that. But ultimately, the Japanese hiring manager maybe have had one bad experience personally with someone who's non-Japanese, and had a negative impression on all non-Japanese candidates. So that's something that sometimes it's hard to resolve in a matter of years. It usually takes decades for mentalities to change. Yeah. Mm,
Yeah, absolutely.
mm,
There's sort of those natural tendencies to
mm.
one situation goes wrong, I never want to make that mistake again, right?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
you burn me once, shame on me, burn me twice, shame on, or opposite, shame on you, shame
Mm,
on me. People have this natural ability to start making stereotypical assumptions. And what's really hindering global growth is when those stereotypical assumptions result in losing out on really good candidates. And
mm.
Frankie, I love that example of Japan, because Japan is, I consider, one of the most wonderful countries in the world, because they're so culturally the same compared to, I mean, you look at
Yeah,
the US, and we're such a melting pot of cultures that we really have no consistency. So you could find, somebody that has some beliefs that might, align to more, I guess, historical beliefs aligning to the, USA, but then you have other people that are more modernized. And, we see that with the new generations of Gen Z really making changes. Um,
absolutely.
so I love hearing about Japan. And one thing that I think is great about reesmarx is that when we take these approaches, we can never change anyone's mind, and we understand that. And that's something that's really incredibly important about DEI, is that you can never change somebody's mind, but you can do your best to advise, and you can do your best to try to change that. So Frankie, in those situations, did you actually get the client to change their mind with at least reviewing certain profiles? Maybe not like the hiring, because who could really
Yeah.
say for that, but were you able to get through?
So in a sense, yes, they were able to maybe potentially see past some of the fact that they're non-Japanese, by really making the hiring managers to see the aptitude in the sense of seeing the candidates' potential to grow and learn, instead of joining with existing experiences and and certain characteristics into the company. So in that sense, yes, and it generated sort of a more of a conversation between internally for the clients to discuss for themselves, where they want, what type of candidates would you want, and what are the flexibilities on your side as well, on the client side as well. Yeah.
Correct. And a question did come through while we were sort of going through that. And the question was regarding, is age often a hidden criteria of your experience? Not explicitly referring to in the writing, but maybe a verbal request that comes through. And in DEI, ageism is in fact a common thing that's sort of seen within companies. So Frankie, not maybe specific to Japan or maybe specific to Japan, do you find that age requests are something that are common and can affect somebody from hiring or even reviewing a profile?
Absolutely. Actually, age concerns, it's actually often more explicit in Asia Pacific, and then for traditional markets such as Europe or North America, even though it's not explicitly said, is often the case where there's this sort of prejudice with candidates of a more senior age, above 50s, where they they comment on things about their motivation or energy levels. That's a typical word that you hear a lot: energy levels, etc. So yes, it does come into factor, but then at the same time, it's actually sometimes some of these senior candidates have, because they've done that and been there, and they've climbed the career ladder, is actually more of an opportunity for many companies to actually consider them, because they're actually much more flexible in terms of the expectations, and actually wouldn't mind taking on risk as well. So there's a positive side to see much more senior candidates to join a company as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Very interesting.
Mm.
Okay.
Erica, just kind of piggybacking just from the US perspective on this, sometimes I feel like companies almost have a quota to achieve, and that's a little bit disappointing. As a recruiter, we are supposed to find the best candidate possible. It shouldn't matter their gender, their age. But when a company does want to fall into the DEI and they do want a more diverse company, they will sometimes come and say, hey, I need more women, I need more younger people. And that is great on one hand, but very disheartening on the other, because at that point, it's hard to find the best candidate. The best candidate might be a 50-year-old, but they want someone younger to bring more life into their company. So a lot of times I feel like in the US, as you said, Erica, it is a melting pot. DEI here is looked at almost like a quota to hit. You need to make sure that you have a very diverse company, as I said, and that does lead to some issues at times hiring the absolute best candidate.
So that's sort of the not so much the opposing view of DEI's importance. It's the importance of DEI, but maybe a misunderstanding that companies have nowadays of they're maybe trying to achieve DEI by actually making more of a disadvantage for the company, because now they are looking for a specific audience, which then sort of conflicts what they're trying to gain. And I think that's absolutely true. I think that sometimes when you try to overachieve something, you might be blinding yourself in the same breath, or in the same way. So DEI is something to be very strategic about. It's not something to look at as something very easy to achieve within your company. I used to come from the IT recruitment space, and I remember every single time we had a request for a new candidate, it was always, we want them to be well experienced with agile. And I know that if a lot of people don't know a lot of IT-based roles, that's sort of a methodology of your work process, of saying that you're sort of doing a continuous work process. You're not just going with one idea and going forward with it. And every candidate I talked to said, well, yeah, I work at a company that's in an agile environment, but really we're still in waterfall, which is the older idea of a process. And so sometimes companies get a bit ahead of themselves of saying, we're already fixing it. We've already aligned it with this stamp. We are, we're going to follow DEI. We're going to follow whatever sort of program they want to initiate, but it's still not done properly. And so it's a deeper conversation. It's much further into that. So that's great. That's kind of like two different opposing views of DEI, but both how they could really hinder a company expanding properly or growing in general, whether it be domestic. Okay. Perfect. We do have lots of questions, so I'm gonna jump to the next one. This one's gonna pull in Nicole. So Nicole, this is gonna be going towards you because you are newer to the reesmarx team. So you might have had a role more recent in the past where this has happened. Have you ever been in a role where you have been treated differently based on the minority group that you fall in? And are you willing, obviously you can share that story from personal or maybe somebody that you knew. But if you've ever sort of seen that in the workplace, please share that story if you have one.
Thanks, Erica. Well, I mean, I would say where would I start, but it sounds horrible. But I mean, just like even coming from this country, from South Africa, coming here, we, and my fellow South Africans around me will agree that we would come and we'd have like 5, 6, 7 years experience in a particular role, and we'd come here and get interviewed and get told, well, you don't have UK experience. I was an event manager. Like, the rules aren't different, from country to country. I still know how to speak to suppliers. I still know how to organize events and things like that, so that was one of the first hurdles. I came here as, an immigrant. And eventually found myself into like the hospitality industry and all of that. And I mean, being a lesbian, it was, everyone just assumed that you had a boyfriend or a husband and things. And in the beginning, I used to keep quiet because I wasn't sure what the reaction was going to be, how it would look on the company when you're out with clients and they ask, they ask about your home life and things like that, So sometimes when they just assumed that I had a husband, I let them think that.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, honestly, coming to reesmarx, one of my best friend Kayla works with us, and I think she's more proud I'm gay than what I am. So so it made it easier, and I felt like so welcome. I mean, I had Frankie, like one of the first people email me, so nice to see someone else from the LGBT community. And from then I was like, what am I hiding for? It really doesn't make a difference. Like, doesn't matter who you are, who you identify with. If you can do the job, then off you go.
Yeah. And what I found interesting is when the four of us were talking earlier, each of you being in the LGBTQ plus community, you all made the statement that was extremely shocking to me, but it made sense because I feel like anytime I've worked with somebody, there is that time frame that they sort of have to come out to me, right? They have to come out in the workplace. And you guys all said that there is this looming thing. It's not just like you come out in your life and you come out to your parents or your friends or anything. It's a one shot and you're done. You feel like with every single role you take, every new company, you have to come out. So can one or
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I can definitely relate to that point, Erica. Yeah. With speaking with as a resource and speaking to new candidates, right? Often when we're talking about senior roles and senior positions to fill, usually by that level, it tends to be the candidate pool really leans towards the male candidates, right? And for someone who someone of a gay man in his early 20s, sometimes I do feel like I have to don on a different persona when speaking to someone professionally, and for at least for the first 5 or 10 minutes of the interaction, just to get a sense of the other party's sort of personality and how well he'll take how forward thinking or how modern thinker that person is, before I will start to show some of my personality, or my true authentic personality. And then for those who seem a bit put offish at the same for those candidates who come off slightly more traditional thinker, then I would probably put on a deeper voice to speak with him and just to show that credibility in a true business sort of exchange of conversation. But again, I would think that would be my prejudice on some of my candidates as well, because I never actually know what my candidates actually think of me. It could be me posing my insecurities on my candidates, right? And to say, oh, this candidate must think that of me, when in reality they're not even thinking about that at all. They're just focusing on the content of our conversation about recruitment. So yeah, it
Because
could.
naturally,
Hmm.
there's parts of the world that are less comfortable with, and so there's you when working as a global recruiter, I mean, you're
Yeah.
sourcing in places across the globe. So, has there been times that from, a geographical standpoint, or a region that you're sourcing in, that you feel like you do have to sort of put on this different persona, or you expect that maybe the candidates are putting on a different persona?
I would say yes, for certain roles where, for example, in the Middle East or some parts of South Asia, they would, strictly require us to please go and find male candidates for certain roles, because they need to speak with, government departments or ministries or people in the public sector. So, in those parts of the world, female candidates often are not allowed to step foot in those public institutions, right? So yeah, and for certain candidates in that region, most of them are quite well traveled and worldly, and however, but at times you do feel like, you do have to speak in a certain way, and yeah, I do have to change the way that I speak as well, to when interacting with certain candidates in certain markets. Yeah.
I completely agree. And it is mainly the region that Frankie was speaking about, the Middle East, especially is when I call it butch it up, just because but it is more my prejudice on them. But at the same time, you do hear a lot about different cultures and how they do look at LGBTQ. And so naturally, you have to be very careful, because at the same time, we want to be successful at our career, and our career is to sell these jobs to people. So to some extent, I don't know anyone who doesn't act a little bit differently when they jump on a call, just because they're looking at this, that, or the other. Now, I can tell you that, especially in the U.S., I live in the Bible Belt. That's what they call it. So it's that southern, eastern states, and especially now, as I have gotten more into the corporate world, Erica, I don't see it as much. But when I did teach, I was very careful with my parents, just because you have to be you don't want to lose credibility as a teacher just because of this one aspect of yourself. But you also have to understand that there are people who can be very, very narrow-minded about that kind of stuff. And you do lose credibility. Unfortunately, I wish it wasn't the case at all. I wish nobody cared anymore, but you have to be realistic at the same time. So I agree with Frankie. I do very often change how I want to act or be perceived when I'm speaking with certain candidates. And it is disappointing that people feel the need to do that. But in the same breath, that is also, as Frankie said, my prejudice coming out on others a lot.
Which is in some degrees warranted, because you've had those experiences. And so you're built up with those concerns. And so, I mean, and this is DEI really at a snapshot of, DEI is not just important for the company to register, but it's also for the employees to know, can I be comfortable? Can I let my own walls down and not just assume that you're going to treat me like other, it goes hand in hand, Frankie, with, I think it was like the ageism that you had talked about, of that, we see it so often because it's something that, maybe there was one candidate that wasn't very good that they hired, that they had to fire, and they happened, to take a risk on the age, or they put that to the side, their, personal beliefs. And so we can sort of see it on that other side too, of any individual feeling like, am I not going to feel that inclusion? Am I never going to feel good enough for the company? And you sort of build up that in yourself. And so changing that is both, I mean, that's why this whole webinar got started. Was I went through DEI training, and I'm currently pregnant. I'm going to be going on maternity leave pretty much any day, about 2.5 weeks away from my due date. And I remember when my sister got pregnant prior to me, she was talking about how, when she goes back to work, she thinks she's going to go part-time. And I was, from a recruitment standpoint, so upset with her. I said, this is your job. Like you owe it to your company to do this. And then I went through DEI training and I said, oh my gosh, like what a horrible sort of thing that was taught to me through society of like, get back to work. You've got things to do. You've got money to make. You have to respect the company you work with, or they're not going to respect you. And it's something that socially we are taught. And so just cracking that and understanding, is this me sort of going against DEI within myself, or is this a company going against? And so a lot of self-reflecting is really important. And Nicole, I know right after Frankie had made a statement, you were going to say something, I cut you off. Was there anything else you'd want to add?
Oh, no, I was just agreeing, saying that, especially when you're working with different people, that you have to just be a social chameleon. It's just, it is what it is. I mean, the way you'll act with one client or candidate is completely different how you're going to act with other people. And I don't know about you guys, but sometimes it's pretty exhausting. or you get them muddled up,
The adaptability of someone in the recruitment space is definitely something to speak towards that I don't think a lot of people understand until you at least experience it yourself, of just, you're working with, and reesmarx being, we have no border that we stop at. So we work on a global level. And so we're working with so many different cultures, different people.
Yep.
We're understanding different personalities. We're finding our way. And we do have that sense of being a chameleon. reesmarx really big sort of selling pitch. And the reason that we have success on a global level is that we represent our clients. So we're really becoming the face of our client. And so you're not just representing reesmarx, you are representing that client that is in fact that is hiring. And so you have to, their morals, their mission, everything like that is now adopted.
Absolutely. So yeah, on that point, often our candidates get the first impression of our clients sort of hiring, the hiring party's company culture and values and social values, right, firsthand, directly from recruiters like myself, right? If a recruitment agency has a diverse enough team, they can really represent a client also quite well as well. And I think, in the sense, the reason why I joined reesmarx in the beginning, going back to Nicole's point, was the fact that during the interview process, I really felt that I can just be myself. I can come to the office as I am. I don't need to put on don a different mask, because in the past, when I interviewed with other companies, there are comments about, oh, you don't seem aggressive enough, Frankie, as a feedback, because maybe it's my voice, or the color, the way I look, or etc., where just speaking politely is not quite enough. You really have to don on an aggressive personality. But with reesmarx, it's I didn't feel like I need to do that. And it's good to see new joiners to the team which are also quite diverse as well, which is fantastic. And I think that has helped reesmarx actually by demonstrating credibility in front of clients, because we do have a diverse team, which means in a sense we have built up sufficient global experience and knowledge and cultural knowledge as well, in order to help our clients to expand. And that again translates back to our direct interactions with candidates, right? And then candidates feel like, oh, this recruiter seems quite to be reflect quite well on the clients, on the hiring company. So it makes them more likely to engage with us as well. So absolutely.
Which I think sort of answers Doug's question that he just put in the chat box of how does that openness and no boundaries help reesmarx, help our clients? Mike, regarding that question, do you feel like there was anything you would add to what he just said regarding that question?
No, Frankie has a great way of taking the words out of my mouth. I feel like I completely agree with what he was saying. It is great, just coming into the reesmarx company has just been amazing. Especially when you come from a government position where you often feel that you have to be very careful what you say and who you say it to. I love the fact that reesmarx has grown into a diverse company without having the quota mentality. They hire the best people for the job, and along the way, they're just finding these wonderful people that really do create this wonderful family with diverse background, able to tackle all kinds of different roles in various ways. So it's pretty incredible.
Perfect. Yeah. And Doug, I noticed that you had another question that came in. I'm going to answer it real quick, but I want to sort of pause what Mike said because I want to revisit that with another question to pose, actually, directly to you, Mike. But he did ask that, or he had a prospective member saying, I don't think about diversity, I just hire the best person. How would you respond? Well, that statement alone, although it seems like they're anti-DEI, they're actually quite representative of DEI in their company because they want to hire the best person. They're not going into it looking for, a specific race, a specific age, a specific gender, a specific any life situation, sexual orientation, identity. So the way that I would respond to a client like that is I would personally say, that's wonderful. I'm so glad that you're looking for the right talent because that's what reesmarx does. reesmarx, first and foremost, is that we're looking for the right people. We're never putting, those, sometimes if we get those requests regarding age or things like that, it's not like we actually source that. We're not, specifically seeking out individuals. We just now understand the client and the hiring manager a bit more of what their needs are. And so we start to understand, are these soft skills, which is something we refer to of anything that's not on the job spec, right? Anything that's not specifically given to us and it's more verbal, it's more of a want versus a need. We then put that into consideration when we're sourcing of just saying, okay, well, we don't know if the hiring manager would go for this person. So when submitting this person, we're going to say why we are submitting them forward, even though they might have personal restrictions to that type of profile or something like that. So personally, I would answer that of, that's wonderful. I'm so glad that you are not, looking at only a certain group of people. Let's dig deeper. Let's start talking about these soft skills that you request.
Yeah, it's really about how you define what do you mean by best candidate, right? Is it best in the sense of hard technical skills? If that's the case, then I guess it's pretty easy to find a diverse team if yeah. But often the case in our experience, sometimes it's the aptitudes that's not stated on the job description, not stated on paper, that actually has a bigger sort of influence on the hiring manager's decision making in the end, right? So it really goes back to the soft skills and DEI. It really it really touches more on the soft skills of a candidate as opposed to the hard skills that's stated on paper. How well do you are you able to fit into the team? Personality fit, communication style, and motivation and etc. and passion and interest. These things are, they will be much more different when you the conversation will quickly become very different when you put a sort of a DEI aspect to these topics as well. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Now just revisiting one of the last things that Mike mentioned. Mike said, this is what brought me into reesmarx is, what I saw and Frankie, Nicole, and Mike on a call we had earlier, just talking about this and sort of preparing for this webinar. All three of you said that a true driving factor to the reesmarx team was taking a look at our executive team page on our website and feeling really drawn in, feeling like diverse and marginalized groups were really brought to light. reesmarx executive team is split 50-50, gender related, so female to male. We have individuals of color, we have individuals of marginalized groups, and everything like that. It's really present throughout our team, but that executive page really brought you guys in. So my question would be, as a company that I know I tell every new client and new candidate, I drink the reesmarx Kool-Aid. I absolutely love reesmarx. I live, breathe, and just enjoy doing my job and representing this company. But even the most perfect company, whether it be in my eyes or somebody else's eyes, could always do better regarding DEI. So Mike, is there something that you would speak towards reesmarx correcting, and maybe that can educate other people to how they can correct their own company or start looking at their company in a different way?
it's hard for me to answer that, only because I came from such a different world into a company that I really do feel is so inclusive. I don't feel that there is something I would change necessarily. I love the way it is. Like, as I said earlier, you know, reesmarx hires talent without feeling they have a quota to fill. So it's not they hired Erica because Erica was a woman and they needed more female talent. It's not hiring Frankie because they feel that they want an Asian who, you know, is a part of the LGBTQ community. It is really hiring Frankie because he was amazing, Nicole because she brought such a great experience, Erica because she just rocked her position. So it's really hiring based on what you can bring to the company as an individual. Now, I haven't worked in the corporate world for long, so Nicole and Frankie might have something completely different to throw out there. But I just know, coming from a government position where you aren't as revered in a government position, you are viewed more as just a worker ant.
Interesting point there, because I don't know about America, because in the UK, actually, I would think is the reverse. Like, public sector tends to celebrate diversity a bit more, you know, public sector jobs, and then private sector, it really depends on the company culture as well. But going back to your initial question, Erica, is you mentioned that, is there any tips, right, that you know would reesmarx or, you know, provide to other companies? Is that correct, right? To improve DEI, right? I guess it's interesting, because I don't think actually reesmarx we've been doing a great job actually in promoting our own DEI, because, you know, despite, you know, how you know, how rosy everything I said about reesmarx, I actually don't think we've actually ever promoted our values and the diversity of our team so far. I think when this whole topic came up initially of holding let's do a DEI Globinar, well, we were like, why? We were like, we never talked about this, but why? Like, but there are many reasons, right, why we wouldn't do that, because maybe some team members felt like they're just comfortable and there's no need to bring up such a, you know, politically controversial topic, etc., or just, and to rock the boat, or you know, or simply because they don't feel like reesmarx is maybe is actually doing all that much for DEI. It could go both ways, right, as to the reason why we've never promoted that so far. But in terms of tips for sharing to other companies, really promoting the team members. You know, ultimately a company is made of its people, and I think really, like, the reason why I joined reesmarx is because I've seen the profile pictures and LinkedIn profiles of the senior management team, and I saw there are a really mixed gender senior management team, which is very different to other recruitment agencies, and that's why I joined. And I think if we were to go on a Zoom call and everyone go on a Zoom call with a client, and everyone from our side is not diverse, then it doesn't show credibility in terms of global knowledge, global expansion knowledge, and without diversity, no company can actually truly expand. And that's something that most companies need to realize, that in a globalized society with social media, your team needs to reflect your values and your business strategies, right, to expand globally.
That's great to hear. And what I love, and just so that everybody knows, I love the honesty that Frankie comes in with, because when you look at reesmarx marketing, so our marketing really went sort of live in January of this year. And so we're really learning as we go. And so the DEI certification course that I took was really perfect timing, because it was now starting to ask the questions of, do you feel included? Do you feel inclusion? Do you feel equity? Do you feel like we're taking those steps? And I think reesmarx is wonderful at the root of who we are, at our hiring process and everything like that. But you're right, we're not promoting it as much. And so you can take a fantastic company when it comes to DEI, but if you're not promoting that, and you're not drawing to light the fact that half of our executive team is female driven, and the way that sort of gender breakdowns typically are upon executive teams, that's not the norm, or the LGBTQ or any type of marginalized group, we really have that present. But if we don't post, speaking towards June being representation of the LGBTQ month, then how does anybody know that we really take that stance and we do our best to sort of, source going forward for candidates in a sort of DEI approach? How do we do that? So I do think that there's always growth for companies to do. So I love that, Frankie, that you said that. And Mike, I would ask, you personally, coming from a different type of industry, you're feeling that we're doing everything and that you don't feel like there's anything more to do. When you look at June and see that maybe we didn't post anything regarding Pride, do you feel that just doesn't bother you personally? Do you think that might be a cultural difference between Frankie and you? Or do you think that it's just something that you personally don't think about?
Personally, I don't think about it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love seeing all these companies change their logo and support. It would be wonderful to see reesmarx do the same. And I do agree that, we do need to be better about discussing how wonderful our DEI is within the company. But I guess coming from where I was into this, it's just such a breath of fresh air for me personally, that I just kind of am breathing it in right now and just feel so liberated to be a part of something where I can truly be myself, that I just don't really look at anything to be changed as of right now. Now, give me 10 years to stay in this industry and I'm sure that I'll find something that I don't like. But as of right now, I'm just kind of breathing in the breath of fresh air of just not having to worry about who I am and kind of being able to share that with my team.
Perfect. That's good. And there was a question that came in saying, you see, and Mike, you might be able to answer this directly. You see in school systems, there's quite a bit of promotion of the topic of DEI, and they're changing in educational courses and stuff like that. Yet as an educator and in that industry, as an employee, you weren't feeling that directly. So the question does arise, and this is what sort of came in was, companies may promote this. Companies may put the Pride, sort of the rainbow flag, right, as their background, but are they practicing it and are they living it? And do you find that concerns you at all, of if a company is just doing it for show or if they're actually believing in it and taking the actionable steps to create an environment like that? And anybody can answer that.
Well, I mean, let's be honest, half of them probably put a pride flag on there so that they can gain more business. I mean, let's just be honest about that. Like, you're not actively doing anything to better the LGBTQ community. You're putting a rainbow flag up and you probably don't even know what it symbolizes or means. It's just a marketing technique.
Frankie, would you agree with that? Or Nicole? Sorry, Nicole. You haven't actually spoken up. So Nicole, do you agree with that, or do you sort of have a different take on it?
Oh yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I've worked for a company who just changed their logo to, match the pride flag, and that was it. And they just kind of reap the benefits from it. So I do believe that, there are companies that would just do it as a marketing tactic, jump on trend and all of that. But then you do get other companies who you can actually see hosting gay pride parades and things like that, advertising and just like going full at it. And so yeah, I think there's a bit of a split, with it just being a trendy thing and actually fully going in for it and actually celebrating your employees.
I agree with you, Nicole, because it's not a black and white, right? Yes, I agree with Mike to say that, yes, it comes off as slightly fake at times, of course. It doesn't truly reflect value, but at the same time, I think all of these campaigns during Pride Month in June helps at least the LGBTQ community, if Nicole and Mike agree, helps to normalize our presence in the corporate world. At least it's not like something that we should hide about. It's I think it's because of these campaigns that we're much more able to freely discuss these topics as well, as opposed to just hiding it as well. It's not as clear cut, I would say. But it helps at the same time. But at the same time, as most companies, if you look at the workforce, perhaps it doesn't really truly reflect the values.
No, and I agree with that. And I didn't, of course, my cynical answer to look more cynical after Frankie and Nicole discussed it, but I do agree with both of them. I do feel like it does give us more of a presence. It really does help to celebrate us more. I just wish more companies truly understood why they did it. And so I feel the 50-50 that Nicole was discussing, half of them do participate in the parades, but the other half is, you're just putting a rainbow flag, let's be for real. But to hear Frankie say it doesn't really matter, it's still helping spread our message. I mean, that's wonderful. So
it's a good perspective to think from, you know what I mean? And maybe that's the difference from, a UK mindset to a US mindset, or, originally APAC focused mindset to, UK, and really being culturally diverse on Frankie's side. And then Mike, you having that US side of things. I think you both are right in that aspect of, Mike might have been burned multiple times to have more of like that view on it. Like, well, I've been with companies that have done it. I mean, just speaking, from working for the government and working in education, he's got that specific experience to always revert his mind back to. Well, Frankie has, a mashup of experience and a mashup of cultures that he's like, well, it's still important to me. And what's great about DEI is that we're not supposed to all have the same things that are important to us. I mean, when I look at a company being, a straight woman that, has a partner and this is our second child, I'm going to look at health benefits. You know what I mean? I'm less looking at the logo. I'm less looking at the executive team. I'm more so, how can I make sure that a company is successful for me? And that's really important for candidates. If there's any candidates listening, or anybody that, is looking for employment, is to always self-reflect. Is to always say, is this the right opportunity for me? Which goes into my next question, and this will probably be the final question, just looking at time. What I've found from my recruitment background, client relations, business development, is that candidates tend to forget that they also have a say if they want to take a job, right? And so the question is, have you ever run into a candidate that you've had to let go because a company was completely going against DEI, or they were going in with a stereotype, or they didn't want a marginalized group or something like that? And the reason it's somewhat related to what I'm asking is because, you have these candidates and, they might, are you honest with them? Because will the honesty actually benefit the candidate? Because then they say, great, I dodged a bullet. I thought this was a great company, but now I know that if they're thinking of it from that point of view, I'm glad that I know that I would have never accepted it, because they do have that power to not accept. They do have that power to make a right decision for themselves. So a little sort of off topic with my comments, but on topic, and this would be more for Frankie and Mike, just because Nicole hasn't really been on the recruitment side. Have you had to let go of a candidate, and what does that conversation look like?
I'll go first then in that case. So I think usually, yes, I have had one project where we did enter into the really final stretch, and there was a male candidate and a female candidate, and this was in the country of Sri Lanka, and then ultimately the female candidate was not chosen. The male candidate was preferred for the reasons that the role was really intended to be a key contact point for many government ministries, etc. in Sri Lanka, and therefore a male candidate for at least for our client would have been the better choice. Okay, so in a cultural and political sense, that's understandable, but in terms of how I delivered the message to the female candidate, I would not be as explicit in that sense, because it's not to hide the truth, but really there is not much of a point in terms of saying to a candidate that would reflect firstly badly on our client, but also to the sense that, you know, we don't want to feel let the candidate feel like this candidate cannot no longer go after and pursue other similar jobs because of this feedback. I don't want this feedback to affect her impression on all future jobs in in a related industry, because there could be a chance that another company would take her on. But if I should I ever have ever given her that feedback, that honest feedback, just because you're female, then it could be likely that candidate would never went after similar roles, because there's no why bother. It won't happen to me anyway, because in my previous feedback with Frankie, these companies would only want male candidates, etc. So, you know, there is a fine line to walk as to, you know, how honest we should be, and it depends on the culture and the country as well. Yeah. Mm.
So you might hinder them from a DEI perspective, that they'll walk into next roles of
Exactly.
always feeling curious if that's going to be the answer, and realistically, it's just it's a one hiring manager decision type thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Mm.
Mike, would you add anything?
I don't believe I've ever had to necessarily turn a candidate away, or, you know, tell them they went for someone because of, you know, they were male, you're female. I've never had that. Now, I have had candidates come to me and say that after interviewing or after working through the process, they do feel as if their gender is being looked at poorly, and they feel as if they're not going to get the job because, you know, clearly they want a man in this position, or clearly I'm not what they're looking for because they want someone with more diversity. I have had that said before, which is disappointing to hear. You as Frankie said, you have to be very delicate with how you handle these situations. You don't want them to feel as if this is going to be a norm across the board when they go for that same job. But you also have to understand and delicately take that feedback to your account manager and have that feedback given to the company so that the companies can ultimately improve this process in the future. I don't think any company wants to feel or have a candidate feel that they are discriminating against them. So I feel like in that sense, it is our responsibility to really discuss with that client and company, you know, this is how you can improve in the future.
Wonderful. And Doug, I know we're at our final couple minutes. So I think there was a lot of great topics discussed, a lot of different opinions, which is great. And the overall takeaway is that DEI is not something that can happen overnight. It's something to really be worked at, something to really take a stance with as a company from a moral way and also an actionable way. And I hope that this was beneficial for people to hear it from the recruitment side, as well as just our own personal takeaways. So thank you, Doug, for giving us the opportunity to have this webinar.
I appreciate the conversation. I really thought this was informative, interesting, inspiring. Loved all of your input. I think, you know, the reason why I asked that question about diversity, and I do want everyone as a leader to be thinking about diversity, because it's not just an individual role, it's the chemistry of a team, especially those of us that have been on leadership teams. We know, especially if we're growing internationally, if you're hiring all white men who are Christians and you have an international business, I can tell you that that's a bad strategy, even if you think that the next person you're going to hire is going to look the same and have the same background. It doesn't make sense. And that was kind of where I was going. That was the gist of what I was feeling from the person. I've run a joint venture in Japan where I was the only non-Japanese, and it's not a bad reflection on Japanese people. But when you think about having a company in Japan or in any country and not having a distribution of gender and gender gender preferences and different colors and religions and people from different backgrounds, and you don't really fully appreciate the chemistry of your team, it becomes really a problem, I think, or it becomes certainly a lost opportunity. And because people recognize that you don't understand that, and they will leave, if they have those kind of because that brings innovation, it brings more success. Anybody that's a baseball fan will understand the concept of chemistry. I'm a Yankee fan, fortunately or unfortunately. In the last several years, they became very right-handed. Like the best next player they were going to trade for was a right-handed player. Well, left-handers do really well in Yankee Stadium. Why are you trading for right-handers when you're not thinking about the chemistry of the team, and teams that have strikeout people and people who hit for average, and the combination of talented people within the team becomes critically important for the success. And they've not been successful because they didn't figure that out along the way. It's the same thing with any leadership team, and you all know that. And so thank you so much, Erica, for your leadership. Thank you all for your work with reesmarx, and it was really great to understand more today about what reesmarx brings to the table. Erica, congratulations as well to number 2 for you.
Thank you.
Are you looking forward to the excitement of the next weeks ahead?
I'm not looking forward to the lack of sleep, but I am eagerly awaiting this baby. I'm very excited this time around. We have my son Max, and now we're going to be having little Vienna. So it will be a totally different world for us. So I'm very excited, nervous, but very excited.
You're going to have the perfect balance.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Congratulations, and a very international name as well. Congratulations.
I couldn't do it any other way, right?
Well, anything else that you'd like to say in conclusion, and then we'll close the room.
I would just say that there was a lot of things that we, don't even have time to cover when it comes to DEI. We think we didn't even stab into the race side of things that we see, the sexual orientation, the identities, and everything like that. So there's a lot for people to learn. So I would urge people to connect with Maria Putnam and try to get educated and make a change within your company. And this is a first step for reesmarx of just trying to be even better. And we hope to promote that to other people. And just thank you.
Thanks everybody for attending. Take care. Have a great Friday weekend.
Thank you very much.